James and Laura drove slowly along the winding country road, their tires crunching through fresh snow. The sky was a dull gray, and the falling flakes clung to the windshield, caught in the wiper's relentless rhythm. At first, it was just the ordinary drift of winter, the banks along the roadside rising unevenly. But then James noticed something strange, too symmetrical, too deliberate. The snow seemed to form walls, stretching upward like the sides of a tunnel. Laura's eyes followed the path ahead, her voice tight. "It's weird, isn't it?" James nodded, gripping the wheel a little tighter. "Yeah, it's like someone built this." As they moved forward, the tunnel narrowed. What had once been rough, jagged snow now appeared polished, smooth as ice, reflecting the car's headlights with a strange, luminous sheen. The further they went, the narrower the corridor became, the walls closing in almost imperceptibly. The sound of the engine echoed oddly against the snow, as though they had entered a different space entirely. Then, up ahead, a second tunnel appeared, branching sharply to the right. It led in the direction of their house, though James knew their driveway entered from the opposite side. The path was flawless, carved cleanly through the snow, like a freshly sculpted sculpture that shouldn't exist. Laura swallowed hard. That's our house. But it can't be. We don't come in from here." James felt a chill creep up his spine. Something about the tunnel was unnatural, alive in a way he couldn't name. The walls seemed to shimmer, edges impossibly sharp, and a cold silence pressed in from all sides. A shadow moved within the tunnel, too still to be human, yet too defined to ignore. James' pulse raced. Laura reached for his hand, her grip urgent. The figure said nothing, only stood there, blocking their path, a sentinel in the impossible snow corridor. James's mind screamed to reverse, to escape, but their car was already halfway down the branching tunnel. The snow walls glowed under the headlights, immaculate and perfect, and the air itself felt like it was holding its breath. They were moving forward, drawn into the unknown, and the world outside the snow had vanished completely. The car crept deeper into the branching tunnel. Snow walls pressed so close that the headlights reflected endlessly, creating dizzying patterns on the windshield. James felt a tightness in his chest, a knot of fear that refused to loosen. Laura's knuckles were white on the wheel, her eyes darting to every flicker of shadow along the walls. "This isn't normal," she whispered, voice shaking. James swallowed, unsure if he wanted to admit how unnerved he felt. No, it's like the tunnel is alive." The walls shimmered faintly, almost imperceptibly, as if the snow itself were breathing. Each movement of the car made the reflections dance like pale ghosts, and James could swear he saw shapes, figures just beyond the glow of the headlights, vanishing when he blinked. The path curved sharply, impossibly tight for a normal road, yet the tires gripped as if the asphalt had been waxed. Ahead, the faint outline of their house appeared again, but wrong. The windows were too dark, the roofline slightly askew, as if someone had built a replica, a mirror image twisted in subtle, unsettling ways. "James, that's not ours," Laura said, voice barely audible. It's like someone made a copy." A low wind whispered through the tunnel, though the air inside was still. The headlights caught movement in the walls, small cracks, tiny shapes shifting.
Snow fell from the ceiling in slow, deliberate drifts, almost like flakes were falling in reverse, climbing toward the top instead of down. James pressed his foot on the brake, but the car slid forward, pulled along by something intangible. Panic started to rise. "We shouldn't—" Before he could finish, a figure appeared at the edge of the headlights, tall, wrapped in dark cloth, motionless as if waiting. James slammed on the brakes, but the car skidded, stopping mere feet from the figure. Laura gasped. It's just standing there, watching us." The figure did not move. The walls around them seemed to pulse, expanding and contracting like the chest of some giant creature buried beneath the snow. James's rational mind screamed to reverse, but the pull of the tunnel, the impossibility of the path, made them feel as if they had already been chosen, drawn into a place where turning back was no longer an option. A whisper seemed to curl in the air around them, unintelligible but urgent, and the figure raised an arm, pointing forward, deeper into the impossibly narrow corridor. James and Laura exchanged a look, and for a moment the terror was mutual and complete. They were not just lost in snow, they were trapped in a place that had a will of its own.
The car moved forward, inch by inch, deeper into the tunnel. James's hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles ached, and Laura's eyes were wide, scanning the walls of snow for anything that might explain what was happening. That's when she noticed it. Faint etchings in the walls, delicate lines carved into the gleaming snow. "James, look," she said, pointing. "They're symbols. Letters, maybe?" James squinted, leaning closer. The shapes were strange, unfamiliar. Some resembled numbers, others strange runes or scratches that made no sense. They glimmered faintly in the headlights, like frost that had frozen mid-movement. "I don't—" he began, but the car jolted slightly. Ahead, a shadow flickered across the tunnel, too fast and fleeting to be human. James slammed the brakes, and the tires screeched against the icy road. The shadow reappeared, moving along the walls, twisting and sliding over the smooth snow. James's pulse raced. "It's following us," he muttered, more to himself than to Laura. Laura shook her head, shivering. "I don't think it's following. I think it's waiting, or guiding." The walls of the tunnel seemed to respond to the shadow's presence. The symbols glowed brighter as they passed, etched deeper into the snow, some twisting into shapes that looked like faces, screaming silently. James could swear he saw his own reflection in one of them, but it was wrong, hollow, with eyes darker than night. The car continued forward, pulled by some invisible force. Snowflakes fell slowly from above, not landing on the hood, but drifting back upward, dissolving into the ceiling. A soft, hollow whisper seemed to echo through the tunnel, words just out of reach, impossible to understand. Then, around a tight bend, the tunnel split again. Another path veered left, toward a dark forest they knew they should never enter. James hesitated. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to leave the tunnel. But the path that led to their house, the distorted version, beckoned with a terrible insistence. The shadow appeared again, standing at the edge of the split. Its arm rose slowly, pointing toward the left path, toward the unknown trees. Its presence was heavy, commanding, and in the dim glow of the headlights, James noticed one terrifying detail. The shadow had no face, only a void that seemed to swallow the light. Laura whispered, voice trembling, "James, what do we do?" He swallowed hard, gripping the wheel. The tunnel had a rhythm now, alive, shaping itself around them. The symbols in the snow seemed to pulse, as if responding to their hesitation. The shadow waited, silent, patient, and James realized with a chill that the choice might not even be theirs to make.
The car rolled forward, pulled inexorably toward the left path, toward the forest, and deeper into the nightmare that had been waiting for them all along.
The forest path swallowed the car almost immediately. The snow walls, already impossibly tall, began to shift subtly, bulging and contracting as if the tunnel itself had lungs. James could feel it in the vibrations under his hands, the road pulsing in sync with some silent heartbeat. Laura's voice trembled. "James, it's moving. The walls, they're alive." He didn't answer. He couldn't. Every instinct screamed danger, yet the car continued, drawn forward by some unseen force. The snow that had once been solid now seemed semi-transparent, like frosted glass, and faint shapes moved behind it, faces, hands, glimpses of something not quite human. A sudden jolt made James slam both hands on the wheel. The tunnel narrowed again, squeezing the car so tightly the mirrors scraped the walls. Snow fell from above in slow sheets, almost like liquid. The air smelled cold and metallic, a scent that made his stomach churn. Then the road curved sharply, and the ceiling lowered, pressing closer to the roof of the car. James glanced at Laura. Her eyes were wide, reflecting fear mirrored in his own. The shadows behind the wall seemed to lean forward, watching, waiting. "Did you see that?" Laura whispered. James nodded, unable to speak. A hand, or something like a hand, stretched through the semi-transparent wall, pausing mid-air as if testing the limits of the barrier. The skin looked pale and wet, fingers elongated unnaturally. He jerked the wheel, but the car slid smoothly along the road. No brakes could stop it. The tunnel's pulse grew stronger. James realized with a sinking heart that it wasn't just moving, it was reacting to them. Every hesitant breath, every glance, every tiny motion in the car caused the walls to constrict or swell. The snow seemed to be guiding them, but toward what? Ahead, the faint outline of a door appeared in the wall. At first, he thought it was a trick of the headlights, but as they drew closer, the door became real, wooden, carved, old. A sense of recognition pricked at James, though he had never seen it before. The shadow from before appeared again, standing beside the door, silent, its face a void. Laura's hands shook on the wheel. "We can't stop here. We shouldn't stop." James swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel tighter than ever. The tunnel groaned softly, almost like a warning, and then, without choice or consent, the car rolled toward the door, the breathing walls tightening around them like a living cage, pulling them closer to whatever waited behind it. The car creaked forward, the wooden door looming closer in the headlights. James's heart pounded so loud he feared Laura could hear it over the hum of the engine. The snow walls on either side glistened unnaturally, and as they passed, James noticed something that made his stomach drop. His own reflection in the snow, only it wasn't quite right. The face staring back at him was pale, hollowed at the eyes, lips stretched into a smile that wasn't his own. He blinked, and the reflection mimicked the motion, but with a slight delay, like it was alive. Laura gasped beside him. "James, that's us, but not us." He glanced at her side of the windshield. Her reflection grinned back with cold, empty eyes, lips twitching unnaturally. The snow around them seemed to ripple, and the reflections grew sharper, clearer, like windows into another version of themselves. A whisper curled around the car, unintelligible but insistent. It echoed from the walls, bouncing between the snow, making the hairs on the back of James's neck stand on end. The shadow figure from before appeared in the periphery, standing among the reflections, pointing toward the distorted house ahead. James gripped the wheel tighter, trying to ignore the unease crawling through his chest.
But then movement in the reflections caught his eye, versions of themselves sitting at the dining table, watching them through invisible walls. The duplicates were still, emotionless, but their eyes followed every inch of the car's progress. "What is this place?" Laura whispered, voice trembling. Why are there copies of us?" James couldn't answer. He felt trapped between reality and the reflection, each turn of the tunnel warping what he thought he knew. The snow walls pulsed, breathing, alive, reacting to the fear coursing through them. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, every breath mirrored in the hollowed versions of themselves. As the car rolled closer to the wooden door, the reflections shifted, moving on their own now, leaning forward as if trying to reach out. James swerved slightly, and the figures mimicked the motion, their eyes following, unblinking, unrelenting. Laura's grip on his arm was firm but shaking. "James, we're not going to make it out like this. I know it." James felt the pull of the tunnel, the door ahead, the endless staring reflections pressing in from every angle. He realized, with a cold certainty, that whatever waited behind that door was tied to the versions of themselves, the copies, watching silently. And the moment they reached it, nothing would be the same again.
The wooden door loomed ahead, dark and foreboding. But it wasn't the door that made James's stomach twist. It was the figure standing beside it. The hooded silhouette was taller than any human should be, motionless, face a void in the dim light, but the air around it thrummed with presence, intent. Laura whispered, voice barely audible, "James, it's pointing inside." The figure raised one long, pale arm slowly, the hand extending toward the dark interior beyond the door. A cold gust of wind seemed to spiral from the opening, carrying a whisper of something unrecognizable, a language that scraped at the edges of James's mind. James's fingers clenched the wheel. We don't have to go in," he said. But even as he spoke, the tunnel around the car seemed to pulse, narrowing slightly, nudging them forward. It was like the snow itself wanted them inside. Laura's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to go. I can feel something bad waiting." The hooded figure didn't move from its place, but its presence was overwhelming, pressing down, filling the car with a suffocating sense of inevitability. James could feel it in his chest, in the tightness of his throat. The figure's pointing hand was a command, a promise that refusal wasn't an option. A flicker passed across the snow walls, a shimmer that wasn't there before. Shapes moved within, shadows bending and twisting toward the door. James noticed the reflections again, twisted versions of themselves, their hollow eyes fixed on the doorway, urging them forward. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but the car had already begun to roll toward the door. The snow walls pulsated like a heartbeat, the air thick with the scent of cold metal, and something else, something ancient and wrong. Laura gripped his arm, shaking. "James, if we go in, we might not come back the same." He swallowed hard. "I know, but I think we're already inside it. The tunnel, the snow, the reflections, they've already changed us." The hooded figure remained silent, patient, unyielding, and the car crossed the threshold of the wooden door. A shiver ran down James's spine as the world outside the tunnel, the familiar road, the distant farmhouse, seemed to vanish entirely. The air inside was heavier, warmer, unnatural. Shapes moved just beyond the headlights, forming the outline of rooms, hallways, and furniture, eerily resembling their own home. But everything was wrong. The angles were slightly off, the colors muted, and the atmosphere thick with anticipation.
The hooded figure waited at the threshold, arms still raised, silently inviting them deeper into the impossible house.
The car rolled fully into the distorted interior, and James felt the air shift around him, heavy and almost liquid. The headlights cut through the darkness, revealing a house that looked like their own, but every line was off. Doors were slightly too tall, walls slightly too narrow, furniture distorted, and the colors muted, as if the world had been drained of warmth. Laura gasped, gripping the dashboard. "James, this is our house, but it isn't." James nodded, voice tight. "It's like a copy. Someone made it but forgot the details. Everything's wrong." The hooded figure moved silently along the threshold, then stepped aside, a gesture that forced them deeper inside. The snow outside the windows had vanished, replaced by an eerie darkness, endless and impenetrable. Each step they took, though still in the car, felt heavier, like the house itself resisted their movement. Then they saw them, versions of themselves, sitting at the dining table, motionless, eyes hollow and staring. Their copies mirrored their smallest movements, even now in real time, yet the expressions were wrong. Smiles stretched too wide, eyes too dark, faces cold and empty. Laura whispered, voice shaking, "They're watching us, waiting." James's stomach twisted. The duplicates didn't speak, didn't move, but their presence pressed down with a weight that made the hair on his arms stand on end. He realized with a sickening clarity, these were not reflections in snow. These were versions of themselves, trapped or created for some unknown purpose. A faint sound came from upstairs, a slow, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails against wood. The car seemed drawn toward it, gliding without effort along the warped floor. The walls pulsed slightly, responding to their fear, almost breathing with them. James looked at Laura. "We need to get out," he said, though his voice lacked certainty. Before it pulls us in." Laura nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. "But which way? The doors, they're all wrong. They don't lead anywhere real." The hooded figure reappeared at the staircase, silent, motionless, but the gesture was clear. They were being invited, or herded, upward. James's hands trembled on the wheel. The house was alive in ways he couldn't understand, and every instinct screamed danger. Above, the tapping grew louder, echoing, relentless, as if whatever waited upstairs had already been expecting them. The copies at the table didn't move, yet James felt their hollow eyes piercing him, judging, anticipating, warning. The tunnel, the snow, the distorted house, all of it had been a lure. And now he understood the truth with chilling certainty. Once they moved deeper inside, there might be no way back.
The staircase creaked under the car's unnatural glide, leading them deeper into the impossible house. Upstairs, the air thickened, heavy with a cold that seeped into their bones. Shadows flickered along the warped walls, elongating and twisting like liquid smoke. At the end of the hallway, a doorway loomed. James could feel it before he saw it, a presence waiting. Laura's hands shook on the wheel. "James, do you feel that? We're not alone." He nodded, swallowing hard. From the doorway stepped figures that made his stomach drop. Themselves. Perfectly identical, but wrong in every way. Their copies' faces were pale, eyes hollow, lips curved into expressions of silent mockery. One James stepped forward, mirroring his movements with a subtle delay. One Laura tilted her head in a way that mirrored terror, yet held an empty, unnatural smile. The air shimmered around the duplicates, distorting slightly, as if reality itself were bending. "It's us," Laura whispered, "but they're not human." The duplicates didn't speak. They didn't need to.
Every glance, every twitch of muscle conveyed an eerie awareness, an understanding of their deepest fears, their smallest hesitations. They were more than reflections, they were versions, crafted from the tunnel, from the snow, from some consciousness James couldn't comprehend. The hooded figure appeared silently behind them, a sentinel at the edge of the hallway, pointing again, not toward escape, but deeper into the house. James realized with dawning horror this was a trap, a maze designed to draw them in, isolate them, and confront them with themselves. A whisper curled around their ears, unintelligible yet insistent, vibrating in the air like ice against skin. The duplicates mimicked every movement they made, amplifying their fear, reflecting it back with a sinister accuracy that made James want to shut his eyes, but the reflections persisted even when he did. Laura gripped his arm. "James, we need to move before it—" James understood what she meant. The duplicates weren't passive observers, they were bait, luring them deeper. The house breathed around them, walls pulsing, floorboards shifting subtly, guiding them toward some central unseen chamber. As they crept forward, one of the duplicates raised a hand, a silent mirror of James's own trembling gesture. The gesture wasn't friendly, it was a command, and in that moment, James realized they were no longer in control. The house, the snow tunnel, the hooded figure, and now their own twisted selves all conspired to bend reality into something inescapable. He glanced at Laura, her eyes wide and shining with tears. "We have to trust each other," he whispered. And as they moved toward the central chamber, the duplicates followed, step for step, silent and inevitable, reflecting every fear and hesitation back at them. The central chamber loomed ahead, a warped echo of their living room, larger than it should have been, stretching impossibly in every direction. The snow tunnel outside pressed in through the walls, faintly visible through warped windows, shimmering as if alive. James' heart pounded in his ears, each beat echoing the tunnel's rhythm. Laura clutched his arm, whispering, "James, it's closing in. I can feel it." He glanced at the walls. They weren't static anymore. The snow outside, the house itself, seemed to pulse and contract, the very air tightening. The duplicates at the edge of the room shifted closer, hollow eyes unblinking, silent observers of their every movement. A low hum began, vibrating in the floor, the walls, even through the car. James felt the car being nudged forward, toward the center of the room, guided by an invisible force he couldn't resist. Panic clawed at him. "We need to get out! Now!" But the duplicates mirrored his fear, amplifying it, their hollow faces reflecting back every hesitation. One James leaned forward, head tilting in perfect mimicry of his own nervous movement. One Laura's smile twisted impossibly wide, and the weight of it pressed down on the real Laura's chest, making it hard to breathe. The hooded figure appeared again, at the far end of the chamber, motionless, arm raised in silent command. The walls seemed to shrink slowly, inexorably, the ceiling pressing down, the space tightening. The chamber's pulse synced with James's own heartbeat, each contraction faster than the last, every vibration forcing him and Laura closer to the center. Snow from the tunnel outside seeped through cracks, curling around the floor like icy fingers, wrapping around the tires, the car, their legs, gripping, pulling. James could feel the tunnel breathing, alive, reacting to their fear, orchestrating their panic. Laura screamed, voice raw, "James, we're trapped! It's going to crush us!" He grabbed her hand, trying to keep calm. The car lurched forward, drawn by invisible forces, guided directly under the center of the ceiling, where the pulse was strongest. The duplicates stepped closer, faces inches from theirs, echoing every tiny movement. Then the air shifted. The pulse slowed, but the pressure remained. James realized with a chill that the tunnel and the house weren't just trapping them. They were waiting for something. Something in the shadows, unseen, had orchestrated this entire labyrinth. And as the walls closed in a little more, the hooded figure tilted its head, silently acknowledging their presence and the inevitability of what was about to come.
The walls of the chamber pressed closer with every heartbeat, the duplicates leaning in, hollow eyes locked on James and Laura. The hooded figure remained still, arm pointing downward, as if signaling the center where the pressure was greatest. Snow seeped through cracks, curling like icy serpents around the car. James gripped the wheel, shaking. "Laura, hold on. Whatever happens, we stick together." The duplicates mirrored his words, lips moving in eerie unison, their hollow eyes black voids of mockery. The ceiling above seemed to droop, bending reality itself. Then the pulse of the tunnel intensified, vibrating through their bones, resonating in the air and in their minds. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the center of the room. The car jolted violently, throwing them forward, yet they remained inside. When their vision cleared, the walls of the house and the duplicates had vanished. They were sitting in their car, tires crunching on snow, but the surroundings were wrong. Their home was gone. Instead, an endless field of untouched snow stretched in every direction, the tunnel nowhere in sight. The sky was gray, featureless, the horizon impossible to discern. Silence pressed down, heavier than the tunnel ever had. Laura looked at James, eyes wide. Where are we?" He turned the wheel, trying to find a road, a house, anything familiar. Nothing. Only snow, stretching farther than the eye could see. I don't know," he admitted, voice breaking. "It's like we were moved, somewhere else." Then, far off in the distance, a faint shimmer appeared, a column of light, faintly resembling the tunnel they had driven through. But when they tried to reach it, the snow shifted and morphed, creating walls that led them away from it. Every attempt to approach failed, as if the field itself resisted their escape. James realized with a cold certainty, the tunnel, the house, the duplicates, the hooded figure, they hadn't just trapped them physically, they had displaced them entirely, into a space where reality bent and twisted, a place from which there was no normal return. Laura rested her head on his shoulder, trembling. "We'll never get home." He held her tightly, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing in. Somewhere in the distance, the faint outline of the snow tunnel shimmered, waiting for the next step, though whether it was salvation or deeper entrapment, neither of them could know. The field stretched endlessly, silent, infinite, and James realized with a chill that their home, their life, and their reality had been left behind. The snow had consumed everything, leaving them nowhere, forever.